All right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for joining us today. And we're going to go to a quick second round of questions. And I'm going to start off. And members, if you have questions, I don't want to call on folks if they don't have a question. So I know Ms. Jacobs has one, the vice chair has one. If you've got a question, then send me something in the chat if you can, or let our staff know, the subcommittee staff, and they'll let me know. Um, so, Mr. Sacco, a few follow-up questions for you. You know, part of the charge of the mission of this committee is also on global corporate social impact. And I want to ask you uh, your role or your assessment of U.S. companies and corporations in their work in Afghanistan. Defense contractors, of course, but other kinds of contractors that were used, any positive and negative impacts that they had. I know that you talked about the corruption in Afghanistan and the Afghan money and pilfering money and so forth. What role did U.S. contractors play in any of that? If you could speak to that as well.
Well, most I can't come up with a number, but I would say most contractors, whether defense contractors, aid contractors, or whatever, did a good job or did as best the job they could with the contracts that were written. The problem with many of the contracts is that we really, and this was a government fault, we didn't hold the contractors accountable. And we also didn't specifically look to see if those contracts actually accomplished anything. And again, I urge the members to read our monitoring and evaluation, where, there was the risk of doing the wrong thing perfectly. So we would give contracts to American contractors or foreign ones, and they did everything to the letter of the contract, but it accomplished nothing. That's not the contractor's fault. That's the fault of whoever wrote the contract.
Let me drill down for a
Yeah.
second. Um, Now, so you're saying that I guess military leaders or the administration, successive administrations, whether it may have been DOD or the State Department or USAID, that they alone came up with that mission? Were they influenced by these contractors at some point? They were lobbying them to do certain things in Afghanistan? Or are you absolving those contractors any role in convincing them to go in a wayward direction?
Yeah, I'm not absolving some of the contractors. We indicted some and put them in jail. We just got a plea from somebody today on a contractor or a subcontractor. I'm just saying that's, to me, it was the bigger problem. Is contractors doing everything to meet the contract, but it didn't accomplish anything at the end. So that to me is a bigger waste. Now, there were contractors that did substandard work. Those were mainly a lot of subs that came in. And what happened is contracts were being sold from sub to sub to sub. The other thing is there were a lot of sole source contracts that did not follow the acquisition rules. That was a major problem. And that's where we saw a lot of problems. There were the contractors, like somebody mentioned, the G222. That was $400 to $500 million. For airplanes that didn't fly or didn't fly too well, and were basically turned into scrap. That was a situation where I believe the contractors did not live up to the contract and produced insufficient goods. I don't have an estimate one way or the other. I think you can read our reports on some of the major problems with contractors, but I don't like to paint all the contractors with one brush. That's the point I'm trying to make. Many of them did. Actually, many of the contractors, I don't say many, a number of contractors came to us and told us on the QT, this is ridiculous what they're asking us to do. We had contractors that came to us saying the timeline is totally ridiculous. I mean, we had the woman who provided those sexy white goats, Italian goats, that were flown in to, fool around with less sexy Afghan goats to produce mohair or whatever. The woman just went through the roof. This was ridiculous. There's no way you could do this in 6 months. It would take you at least 6 to 10 years. But
who gets in like on that, right? Who gets talked into that idea? Or does some administrator come up with that on their own? A bureaucrat comes up with that on their own? Because you're dealing with companies that have extensive law, as you know, you worked in Congress. had
Yeah.
extensive lobbying operations to convince people to do different things. So I'm wondering, do these administrators or bureaucrats just decide on their own to do this crazy stuff? Are they getting talked into some of that?
Well, in that case, with our goats, she didn't have a lobbyist, that's for sure. She just, signed up for it, did it, and just quit in disgust. So I put that aside. We did not see any evidence of a lobbyist directing this. We looked for that, directing some stupid contract. We looked for it, but we didn't find that. So I can't attest that. It could have occurred. We didn't find it, so I
Fair
can't
enough.
answer it.
No, well, thank you. All right, I'm going to yield back the time, and I know that Representative Jacobs has questions, and then I think Representative Mayer after that will have a question. Vice Chair.